What's up, Chicago? Happy Saturday here on WLS AM 890. It's Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos. It's Chicago Sports Valentine's Day superlatives coming up on this week's episode. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome into this week's episode. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend here in the beautiful city of Chicago. Keep in mind, at the bottom of the hour, WLS AM 890 is going to be bringing you Michigan State at Illinois. Huge matchup for the Illini. And Michigan State, a team that is ranked but has lost 3 out of its last 4, stumbled a little bit coming in at 19-5. Illinois with an incredibly talented team. I'm going to do a brief preview at the bottom of this hour. But for the next 60 minutes or so while you hang out with me, I want to talk a little bit about Chicago sports in general. And what better than the weekend of love than to do some Valentine's Day superlatives. I'm going to be handing out some awards, some Valentine's Day cards as we look forward here because, let's be honest, the football season is over. It's been a week since the Super Bowl. I don't need to dive too deep into it, but thankfully, we can now all officially say that Pat Mahomes is a human being, is not a robot, is not an AI creation of some kind, is not a humanoid. He's a real person, a normal human person, which kind of breathes life into a lot of different franchises, not just the Chicago Bears across the NFL, where it is no longer going to be fait accompli that the Kansas City Chiefs are automatically going to go to the Super Bowl and have a great chance of winning it. Do they have a chance of going back next year? Of course they do. But I think now every single franchise can start building up that hope a little bit that, hey, maybe we've got a shot too as well. And if we do go up against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, they are mortal. They can be beaten. They can be taken down. So let's move on over to our beautiful Chicago sports here. No more Chicago Bears for a while. Of course, we're going to have the Combine coming up. We're going to be talking NFL free agency. We're going to be talking the NFL draft. And then, of course, it's on to OTAs, on to mandatory minicamp, on to real training camp, on to exhibition play, and then, boom, we'll be back in 2025 with Chicago Bears football. Football ain't going away, especially not here on Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos here on WLS AM 890. But we do have a bit of a gap, right? We do have a bit of a break. And as a sports fiend, I'm not super happy about it. Typically, you could, at this time, lean on maybe some Chicago Bulls or some Chicago Blackhawks on a Tuesday, Wednesday night to sort of get you through. And we're going to get to both of those teams right now. But the Chicago Blackhawks have some intriguing pieces on their team, but they're a very frustrating watch. They're still not a very good hockey team. And with every good performance that they have, like a 6-2 win over the Nashville Predators last week, they back it up by losing by going to a shootout with a 5-5 game against the St. Louis Blues and then losing 6-5 in that shootout. So there's still plenty of frustration on that side. So if you're looking for quality, if you're looking for hope, the only thing that we have going in this town are the Chicago Cubs, who have already reported to spring training because they have to be there a little early. Keep in mind, a little scheduling note with the Chicago Cubs. They are going to be playing 2 games in Japan to start the MLB season, and then they're going to come back, play 5 Cactus League games, and then officially begin their season. So they're going to kick it off for MLB a little bit earlier than normal, which is why they're in spring training now. But we've got a little bit of time to wait before the results actually matter. So, in the spirit of love, and in the spirit of this weekend, I thought it'd be fun to do some Valentine's Day superlatives here. And this is the first one that I'm going to do. The first Valentine's Day superlative for our Chicago sports in 2025 is, who is the most likely to fall in love after the first date? And for this one, I've been hammering it for a while, and I'm a part of it. And the reason why I'm saying it is because I think I'm gullible, and I'm complicit in this. The most likely to fall in love after a first date are Chicago Bears fans. We are a frustrated bunch. And you can go back to the quarterback. You can go to the success of the franchise. That we are desperate. And we have cast our lot in the past with the wrong significant other, as in our quarterback. And we are just dying for anything to turn in the right direction. So the most likely to fall in love right now are the Chicago Bears fans because, look, we're looking for anything that we possibly can to set our sights on to hopefully maybe find some long-term commitment in our lives. Let's start with the coaching staff. Ben Johnson. I get it. Very popular hire. 39 years old. Offensive guru. We've seen him a ton within the own division. His offense puts up a lot of points. And to this point, to be very fair, he does carry himself with more confidence and a little bit more of a steady hand, in my opinion right now, than Matt Eberflus or Matt Nagy did, or Mark Trestman did. So those are all positive signs. But holy moly, Bears fans, we got to wait and see on some of these other coaching hires, right? I see some people talking up Declan Doyle, who's 28 years old. We have no idea whether this guy is going to be an offensive success in the NFL. And no offense, the fact that the Chicago Bears hired him sometimes means that he's not going to be the guy. I don't want to be too jaded about this, but Bears fans, this is what we do. As the offseason kings, as true royalty, we're going to fall in love with whatever move the Chicago Bears make in the coming months. My hope is, and my belief is that they attack free agency on the offensive line side of things. And I'll even throw a guy like maybe a Josh Sweat into the category, a defensive lineman on the Philadelphia Eagles who just racked up 2.5 sacks in the Super Bowl, who just earned himself a nice little pay raise, but it's not going to be the top dollar type money that a Myles Garrett's going to want, a Micah Parsons is going to want, or maybe even a TJ Watt in 2026. He's going to come a little bit cheaper, but it's still going to be pricey. But my hope is when they hit off it, when the bell rings on the free agency and for the NFL in March, that they attack the offensive line. And just by the mere concept of Ryan Poles finally doing something in that position, I think a lot of Bears fans are going to fall in love with it. We're going to talk ourselves, Bears fans, into how Antoine Randall is going to change everything. We're going to talk ourselves into how Declan Doyle is the next Sean McVay. We're going to talk ourselves into Dennis Allen's defense, even though, to be very fair, as a head coach, it has not worked out for him, and I'm being very generous there. And from a defensive standpoint, it took him a couple years to build up a really strong defense in New Orleans. Yeah, they've had some great games, but they haven't had some great seasons. And do the Bears right now have the pieces in place, specifically on the defensive line, to make whatever it is that Dennis Allen's defense want to work? As it stands right now in February, I have a feeling that the Chicago Bears are going to attack the offensive line and put a lot of resources into it. It's a great start to start turning that thing around and trying to turn that into a strength of the team. But when we're talking defensively right now, my fear is that we're going to oversell the talent on that side, and I think the Chicago Bears are going to do the same. And if they don't add significant pieces on the defensive line, whether it is free agency or whether it is the draft, I think that unit is going to be a weakness next year. We were throwing the words great and elite around with the defense these last couple of years. And honestly, I'm disappointed. Because as a Bears fan, we don't know anything about quarterback. We at least know a little something about defense. We're supposed to be connoisseurs of defense. And that unit, in my opinion, is solid. I'll give it a good on some weeks. It ain't great. It ain't special. And they need to add to that. And if they don't, I think there's going to be diminishing returns from a couple different players on that unit. And it might be something that we're complaining about in November. So most likely to fall in love are Bears fans. They're going to love every single draft pick that we take, every single free agent that we take. And come July, we're going to be talking ourselves into how this is some sort of playoff team and how Ben Johnson's ready to roll and get it cooking. Let's move on here. Valentine's Day superlatives here in Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos right here on WLS AM 890. On top of that, I'm going to go with cutest couple. And the cutest couple right now in Chicago, who else can it be? We're staying on the Bears tip. It's Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. As it stands right now in February, everything is very hunky-dory. I want it to stay that way, but that is just the reality of the fact of the present. Right now, the cutest couple in Chicago right now is how Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams are supposed to make sweet music together. And they're both saying all the right things. Caleb Williams on Amon-Ra St. Brown's podcast, asking what he would want in his future head coach before Ben Johnson was hired. And when Ben Johnson was brought up, he smiled slyly and said, well, and basically intimated that he wouldn't mind the move. Well, he got that move. He got one of the brightest prospective offensive minds in the NFL. He's done it as a coordinator. He has to now do it as a head coach. That is a good pairing for Caleb Williams. And for Ben Johnson, he also has been a guy who's been saying all the right things about Caleb. When they played each other in season, special arm talent, could hear the zip on his throws, can hear the whistle. Believes he is coachable. Believes that the future is bright. And clearly, Ben Johnson picked the Chicago Bears, not just because of money, even though he got a truckload of it, but he would have gotten a lot of money in a lot of places. He needed at least a version of a QB alignment that he could say to himself, well, if I get in on this, I think this gives me the best shot to prove that I am the NFL head coach that I think I am, that everyone out there, maybe myself included, is still a little skeptical on. So, yeah, they're the hot couple in town right now. Could they possibly become the Phil Jackson, Michael Jordan combo of this town? I don't know. We'll see. It's going to take several years, several playoff wins, and yes, that's correct, Bears fans, a Super Bowl to make that happen. But right now, everything's going good. They are in the honeymoon phase. And let's see how it plays out through the summer. Ben Johnson has said that he is going to coach his players hard and that he's going to set the bar high. There have been some small rumblings, quiet little rumblings about Caleb's work ethic. I've covered this on the show before, so if you're tuning in for the first time, thank you so much for tuning in on your Saturday night here in the beautiful city of Chicago. But what has been intimated is that Caleb's work ethic could improve. That maybe he, detail-wise, on a game-to-game, week-to-week process, could refine a few things. And my take on this is that that could very well be true. And, of course, every quarterback, especially one who's 23 years old and heading into his second season in the NFL, really needs to put the pedal to the metal and drill in and work as hard as they possibly can to try and achieve the potential that they want to have. But again, if we're looking back on this, with Matt Eberflus's staff, with the things that you continuously hear about Shane Waldron, who was fired in the middle of the year, Thomas Brown takes over, it is fair to also hypothetically ask yourself, does Caleb simply not know what he doesn't know? 23 years old, you're heading into the NFL for the first time. The backup quarterback, this isn't a shot at him. This is just reality. Is Tyson Bagent, a guy who's still trying to learn in the NFL. Who was there to show Caleb Williams the ropes? Did Caleb Williams think that he was working hard and no one introduced him to that next level of what it takes to succeed at the NFL level in terms of work ethic? I think that's very fair. Sometimes when you graduate from one level to the next, you think you're doing all that you possibly can, and then you do realize that there's another level that you got to break through. Who was there to show that to Caleb Williams? I think it's fair to say that no one was. So to pin this all on Caleb doesn't work hard enough, well, I think two things could be true. Did they even show him the tools or show him the path of what it means to be an NFL quarterback? And did Caleb resist that? Or did they maybe cater to the kid, the number one pick, a little too much, and maybe some things slid, and as chaos continued to reign throughout House Hall all throughout the year, yeah, maybe a little bit, maybe the loosening of the rope happened a little bit. Two things can be true. But right now, the cutest couple is Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. Right now, it's all hunky-dory. Right now, it's all wine and roses, and they're holding hands. So let's see how this plays out through the summer. And our hope is, as Bears fans, they hit the ground running in week one. And this becomes the pairing that we've wanted in Chicago for so long. Moving on, I'm going to go over to most likely to drive a significant other insane. How can that not be Jerry Reinsdorf and his relationship right now with White Sox and Bulls fans. And this isn't going to be an only just, I'm going to rail on Jerry here for the next couple minutes, because I think what makes it so, I think what drives the insanity is that if you are, look, I'm in my early 40s, so I grew up in sports in the 90s, okay? And if you didn't get that opportunity, I think what makes this a little bit more complicated is that Chicago sports in the 90s, specifically for the White Sox and the Bulls, was a damn good time. I don't need to explain it to you with the Chicago Bulls. 6 titles, 8 years, Michael Jordan, all that good stuff. But the White Sox, starting around 1989, 1990, they drafted guys. They drafted Hall of Famers and multiple All-Stars year after year and just brought them up one after the other. Frank Thomas, Robin Ventura. They had Ozzie Guillen. They had Ray Durham. They drafted a guy like Lance Johnson, who wins a stolen base title. They signed a guy like Tim Raines to play left field. They bring up Jack McDowell, Alex Fernandez, Wilson Alvarez, Jason Beret. I mean, they were just churning guys out left and right. And that didn't stop, too. It went through Carlos Lee, went through Maglio Ordonez. So the White Sox in the 90s was a really good time. And you could say what you want about Jerry spending money now, but at that time, he would sign guys like Albert Bell. He would give money to Jamie Navarro. General manager Ron Schuler either was able to pull some sort of trick that other general managers in the future weren't able to pull off, or just Jerry was a willing participant in the way that the game functioned at that particular time. Now, was he at the forefront of the 94 strike? Yes. Is he probably going to be one of the forefronts of this 2026 possible labor strike that's coming? Also correct. But the one that most likely drive you insane right now has got to be Jerry Reinsdorf's relationship with White Sox and Bulls fans, because from a White Sox perspective, not only does he have no interest in winning, he has no interest in even spending money. He has no interest in even entertaining what it means to be a major league owner in the current marketplace of the year of 2025. He wishes it was still 1997. And that's the rock and the hard place, right? Is that for White Sox fans, we can play the game all we want of, well, we've got a bunch of young prospects. Let's see who hits. Let's see who doesn't. We all know, and I'm not saying this as breaking news, not all prospects make it. And when they don't make it, you have to supplement it with cost-certain, talent-certain commodities on the outside market, the free agent market, to supplement what you have built. The White Sox have no interest in that. And I don't get it personally. I'm looking at this roster right now. It's a younger roster. A lot more names are unknown on this particular team right now. But I think as it stands, the White Sox are going to be worse. 120 plus losses, 120 plus losses is completely on the table for this team. I think we're glazing over the fact that some of these projections like Pacoda have them winning 55, 60 games, and everyone's like, oh, wow, what an improvement, a 20-game improvement. I don't see improvement anywhere on the field. Even if you said to yourself, well, Luis Robert bounced back and had a huge career year, they're looking to trade the guy. The pitching rotation doesn't have guys like Eric Fetty on it, doesn't have guys like Garrett Crochet on there. This team is worse than it was the year before after losing 120-plus games. And I don't know about you, but that would drive me absolutely insane. On the other side, we're doing Valentine's Day superlatives here on Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos. You're listening to WLS AM 890. Keep in mind, we're about maybe 40, 45 minutes away from tip-off right here on WLS AM 890 of Michigan State at Illinois. So moving on, I'm going to go to the other side of town. Who is most likely to have a love song written about him by Chicago sports fans? And hear me out on this one. I think it's Pete Crow Armstrong. Pete Crow Armstrong, the reason why I say this, is still a little polarizing in this town. First half of the year, offensively, he was awful. Second half of the year, especially the last month specifically, he started to flash what I think a lot of people wanted to believe in PCA. That talent starting to come to fruition a little bit. And man, let me tell you, when it was going, it's exciting. It really is. And he has a lot of components that if it breaks right and his offense carries over into this year, I think Chicago sports fans and Chicago Cubs fans are going to absolutely fall in love with this dude. I think he's got cult hero written all over him. The obvious ones are he's faster than the wind. He's a blazer. When he's on base, you can almost say that he's already on second base because he is that good. He causes that kind of havoc. Defensively, he's already a gold glove caliber defensive outfielder. He's going to make some great plays, going to make some highlight reels. He's definitely going to be on Instagram making some of those catches this summer. That's a given. He also has a lot of energy. He's got that youth. He's got that exuberance so that when he slides into home plate with a game-tying run or a game go-ahead run, he's going to let the crowd know, and the crowd's going to let it know back. So for PCA, it's all kind of sitting out there right now that if he hits the ball, if he can play with a version of consistency offensively, Chicago Cubs fans are going to fall in love with this guy. There are going to be love songs written about this dude. Now, how high up he can climb, I don't know. We'll see. You know, personally, if he hits you about 250, 260, 12-ish home runs, but steals you 40 to 50 bases, can score you 80 runs, and if he can somehow, he's going to probably start the year off in the 9-hole, which I like a whole lot because he's got the speed. He gets on base. Whoever hits leadoff has got someone to hit for him. You can kind of roll that lineup over a little bit and get you closer to Kyle Tucker. But if he can somehow hit his way into a top-of-the-order spot in the lineup, stay there and produce, people are going to fall in love with him. There's going to be a lot of love songs written about PCA here in Chicago. On top of that, before we hit our break here on WLS AM 890, I'm going to hit one more here with our Valentine's Day superlatives in Chicago sports. I'm going to go most secretly admired. And the most secretly admired for me, this is just a personal one, is I'm staying with the Chicago Cubs. I'm going with Justin Steele on this one. And I think when we talk about the playoffs and we talk about what the Chicago Cubs need to do to improve upon back-to-back seasons of 83 wins, I think we're kind of sleeping on Justin Steele just a little bit. Now, this was a guy in that first 83-win season, went 16-5. Had a 3.06 ERA, 1.17 whip, 9.1 strikeouts per 9 innings. He was the guy who that every time he took the mound, Chicago Cubs fans and the Chicago Cubs had a pretty damn good idea that they were going to win that ball game that day. And he is by far the leader of that pitching staff. You saw him when things went sideways defensively last year, him call out teammates in the middle of the game, not out of because he's a jerk, but because he cares. And I just think we're sleeping on this dude a little bit because we won 83 games last year, and yet Justin Steele in his first start hurt his hamstring, which I think kind of derailed a lot of the Chicago Cubs' hopes from the jump. But the dude comes back, posts a 3.07 ERA, almost identical to the year before, a 1.099 whip, underneath what he did when he won 16 games, and 9 strikeouts per 9 innings. These are almost identical statistics. The only difference is the dude went 5-5 and picked up no decisions like it was nobody's business. So I think, in terms of most secretly admired, if the Chicago Cubs can get back into the mode of we win on Justin Steele days, the day that Justin Steele pitches is a day that the Chicago Cubs have a great chance to win a game, I think that's going to portend a much more successful season for the Chicago Cubs. Last year, that was Shota Imanaga. Every time Shota was on the mound, Chicago Cubs win. If they can kind of create two guys where they feel really, really good about themselves, about no matter what happens, low-scoring game, high-scoring game, we're going to win that day, I think that's what gets you closer to 90 wins. That's what gets you closer to the playoffs. And Justin Steele, ho-hum, ace, one of the better pitchers in the National League, coming off a really down year, and yet his numbers are exactly the same. That's why I think in Chicago sports, I think he's one of the most secretly admired, because the dude is an ace that we don't quite know it yet, but we're about to realize it, I believe, in 2025. Coming back here on Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos right here in WLS AM 890. Thank you so much for tuning in here on your Saturday night. Make sure you stick around for the top of the hour. Michigan State at Illinois. Big matchup for the Illini against Michigan State. They've been scuffling a little bit, so maybe the Illini got them right where they want them. It would definitely be a huge win for the Illini team. On this week's episode, because it is Valentine's Day, I'm in the holiday spirit, a little bit of a downtime in Chicago sports. I'm playing a fun little game of Valentine's Day superlatives for my Chicago sports. If you missed it, I gave cutest couple to Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. We'll see if they make it. Most likely to fall in love after the first date, I got Chicago Bears fans. Most likely to drive a significant other insane, Jerry Reinsdorf and White Sox fans. So let's keep it rolling right here. Most likely to forget Valentine's Day is even a thing. I'm sticking with the White Sox here. It's Chris Getz. Chris Getz, for White Sox fans, is unfortunately the significant other that literally got them nothing for Valentine's Day, forgot what day it was, had no plan in place, and then also told you, oh yeah, by the way, next year for Valentine's Day, I don't plan on doing anything else. I mean, it's a tough look. It's a tough look when your general manager takes your payroll down from $150 million to $80 million, and then also tells you, I think we're going to win more games next year. It is a tough look when at the end of a season, when you lose 120 plus games, your general manager, Chris Getz, gets in front of a microphone and says, I don't see us really spending a lot of money or going to improve the organization from outside elements as in free agents. We need to see production and we need to see improvement from within. It's a tough place to be. Now, I understand that there's a multi-year plan in place to try and rebuild the health of the organization through the farm system and create some more cost-controlled players with talent on the Chicago White Sox. But I'm telling you, this plan will never work unless they decide to foray out into free agency and start bringing in quality talent to supplement that other talent that you're growing in your own backyard. And again, it just sort of feels like the Chicago White Sox are going to punt and literally do nothing, much to the chagrin of Chicago White Sox fans, until they figure out this labor strike in 2026. Because as it stands right now, they have an owner that's probably directing the general manager to not dip into a marketplace that they're not comfortable operating in, but it's a marketplace that isn't going away, and if anything, it's only ballooning up bigger and bigger. Unless this labor strike somehow puts some constraints on that, I don't think it's going to be great for Chicago White Sox fans this year, next year, and probably for next 3 or 4 years. So sorry, Chris Getz doesn't care about your Valentine's Day. Moving on to the other side of town, what about the other general manager of our baseball teams here in this Chicago sports landscape? I'm going to go for Valentine's Day. The most mysterious is Jed Hoyer. Can't quite get my finger on what exactly is going on there. Now, he is going to be a free agent at the end of this year. They might not let him go. After 14 years with the organization, he may no longer be with the Chicago Cubs. Tom Ricketts might move on from him, especially if they don't make the playoffs they're going to. So what we've seen from Jed Hoyer is a move that we don't really see, that was a little un-Jed Hoyer-like, bringing in a guy like Kyle Tucker. We see them try and rebuild the bullpen, but doing it through ways that are very Jed Hoyer-like bringing in guys like Ryan Brazier, 37 years old, Ryan Presley, 36, 37 years old. And as of this taping, which is Wednesday during our wonderful snowstorm here, as of this taping, Alex Bregman has not made his decision on whether he's joining the Chicago Cubs. And I'm sure this hasn't happened yet. But there are going to be rumors about whether the Chicago Cubs could trade for Dylan Cease. So mystery swirls around Jed Hoyer here of exactly how far can he push the envelope, payroll-wise, to bring this team up to a competitive level that almost makes it an epic collapse if they didn't make the playoffs, which would keep Jed Hoyer in his job? Or how much does he roll the dice and be like, man, I hope if I just get this thing to 86, 88 wins, we get in, and maybe that's enough for me to keep my job? It's a difficult place to be. And on top of it, too, I find it to be a little unfair and disingenuous, right? Where if Jed Hoyer is a lame duck general manager, you would think he'd want to do everything that he can to keep his job. So he's being put in a position, specifically with Alex Bregman, right? Where if I don't sign him to a long-term deal, let's say 4, 5, 6 years, if I don't do that, I might be keeping myself out of the playoff race and myself out of a job. If I give him that 4, 5, 6-year deal and I keep my job, now I'm stuck with a contract I probably never wanted in the first place, and will further impede perhaps my job and my ability to do it well, as in Jed Hoyer, if these constraints on these luxury tax mandates are continuously put on the Chicago Cubs by their owner, Tom Ricketts. It's a weird place to be. Now, threading that needle, right, and this has been the reports that have come down here on Wednesday, is that Alex Bregman has narrowed this down to 3 teams: Detroit, Boston, Chicago. I don't want to go too far into this because I do have a feeling by the time you're listening to this on a Saturday, he will have selected his team. But threading the needle for Jed Hoyer would be getting Alex Bregman on a 2-year deal, 2 or 3-year deal, one with a player option in the second year, where it actually is more of a 2-year deal. If Alex Bregman wants, he can re-enter the market after 1 year if he has a great season. But by that 3rd year, you're out of it. And by that 3rd year, let's be honest, again, labor strike, possible 2026, you can reset your books that way. Dylan Cease is the same situation. Sure, you're going to have to give up some of your precious draft capital, some of your prospects. But again, what does it matter to Jed Hoyer? Dylan Cease, 1 year left on his contract. They don't have to re-sign him. And it helps ensure them get to the playoffs, and then they could just keep trying to replenish the farm system from there. Other problem with giving Alex Bregman 4, 5, 6 years is a lot of Cubs fans might say, yeah, go ahead and do it. It's not my money. Well, also keep in mind, would that prevent you from trying to re-sign Kyle Tucker to, by far, the largest contract in Chicago Cubs history? They're going to have to give him easily, let's just start the number at a small number, $380 million, and go up from there. That's double more than they've ever given Dansby Swanson, John Lester, Jason Hayward. So with signing Alex Bregman long-term, would that prohibit them from doing that? I'd rather have Kyle Tucker than an Alex Bregman, if that's my choice. But most mysterious of how this is going to play out is Jed Hoyer. How does he play his hand? Can he go... You can't go all in. Can you go all in-ish? Can you go mostly in? Can you go predominantly in? And that's going to be the question for him and the Chicago Cubs. It might be the difference between them making the playoffs or not. All right, let's go to a sad one because a lot of more of these are very much baseball related. We got to go with, oh boy, the most in Chicago sports, getting close to most likely breaking up. And this is a bit of a throuple. It's Bulls fans, it's the general manager, AK, it's ownership, Jerry Reinsdorf, and where do these 3 elements go moving forward? It's tough being a Bulls fan these days. And as much as I would, a lot of people have this argument all the time of, would you rather at least know that you're the Chicago White Sox and you have a direction, and your direction is to bottom out, to get as many young assets as you can to hopefully build up in that model and in that forum. Very painful. And we have the other side too as well, where of course, I think, the Chicago Bears, for example, the next couple of years, they're going to be putting a lot of resources into going for it with this iteration of general manager, head coach, and quarterback and roster. Chicago Bulls are right there in the middle, and man, is it frustrating. We have a general manager who on one side of his mouth trades Zach LaVine. On the other side of his mouth, when he won't trade Vucevic at the trade deadline or some other pieces, he says that I still like our chances of making the play-in game. If you like your chances of making the play-in game, why are you trading Zach LaVine? And if you're trading Zach LaVine for the future, why are you keeping these other assets on the team? And why aren't you bottoming out? Why are you even – you just traded your best player and you want to make the play-in tournament. Make that make sense. This Bulls team, and I'm going to say it every time I bring it up, they need to lose as many games as possible to try and get into the top 4 of the lottery. A lot of people are going to tell you about Cooper Flagg with Duke, and he's a great player. He will be the number 1 pick. I'm telling you, you don't necessarily have to have the number 1 pick to start turning the fortunes of this franchise around. I believe that there are 4 players right now that have an opportunity, and there might be more moving forward as we get into the tournament, that could really come in right away and become future cornerstones for the Chicago Bulls. The question is, does the front office have the stones to make that happen? Well, clearly they don't, because they've kept professional players like Kobe White and Vucevic on the team who are going to try hard. Both of them are having good seasons, and they may win a couple more games than they would like to, and keeping them out of the opportunity to get into the top 4 because it's all lottery ball driven. And unless there's something up their sleeve, like unless somehow the Chicago Bulls honestly really believe and think that somehow they're going to be able to get their hands on a player like Giannis Antetokounmpo in the next couple of years, if they're not trying to build it through the draft, they're simply going to be stuck in the middle. And frustration will turn into apathy. Apathy will also breed anger. Anger back into apathy, and it will just go back and forth. And Bulls fans, man, the Jordan curse is real. We're at 27 years, people. The moment Jerry Reinsdorf thought, hey, I should just start rebuilding this team now with Jerry Krause's pick of Tim Floyd, and we can do it with Tony Kukoc, we're going to look back in history and say that was one of the biggest mistakes they could ever make. I don't care. Jordan was 35, 36. Maybe he comes back. Maybe he doesn't win again. You have to try. It's been 27 years. And unfortunately, there's some sort of version of a breakup coming. The Chicago Bulls right now are number 3 in the NBA in attendance. And if they're not careful with the Chicago Bulls, people are going to stop going to the games. And if ownership isn't careful and gets rid of this general manager and Mark Eversley and starts new somehow with some sort of new direction that is at least pointing up or pointing down, not pointing in the middle, it is only going to further this concept of maybe Bulls fans, some of them starting to break up with the Chicago Bulls. I can't even imagine it. I never missed a game my whole life up until about 2 or 3 years ago. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't watched a lot of games this year because I know the product that I'm getting out there on the court, and I have a pretty good sense of what we think the front office's direction is to keep pushing with this current group to get into the 8th, 9th, 10th spot, which doesn't get you anywhere in the NBA and only continues to frustrate your fans. Let's keep it rolling here. We're doing Valentine's Day superlatives here on Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos right here on WLS AM 890. Chicago Sports Edition of Valentine's Day superlatives. Most Instagrammable. Who's good for the gram? I got to throw it out there. Let's get on a positive one. It's Connor Bedard. The guy is still a highlight reel. He's still a possible star. He's already probably a tiny little star on a really, really bad team, but he's got a huge future. And outside of Caleb Williams, be honest with yourself. If there is one player that I would probably trade highlights with other friends of, did you see what this guy did? Did you see this top shelf wrist shot? It's still Connor Bedard. There's been plenty of NHL national analysts that have been trying to criticize him lately, and I think it's just maybe a laziness and a bit of an obvious move that the Chicago Blackhawks are bad. So it's an easy for one of the old timers to go after the young kid who's supposed to be leading the charge and saying, well, why aren't you better to make your team better? And I still think Connor Bedard is great. And I believe that the 19-year-old kid has a bright, bright future ahead of him. But the Chicago Blackhawks have to get serious about managing and balancing the act of having some of these young guys come up, mature, grow, and get some balance. Well, also they have to go and dip in and not just bring in middle of the road veterans. They have to start bringing in some higher end talent, at least one guy that they can pair with Connor Bedard. Like, honestly, Steven Stamkos would have been the move. He went to Nashville instead. Older guy, I get it, but at least an established guy, a running mate that could have given you 3 or 4 years of Connor Bedard in his early 20s that would have gotten him really rolling. But most Instagrammable, the guy who still does highlights that I'll share with all my buddies, it's easily Connor Bedard. Next one coming up on Valentine's Day, Chicago Sports Edition, Valentine's Day Superlatives. Who is the hardest to love? I'm going with the Cubs' potential bullpen. I want to like this. I want to like what they've done. I've been burned before, and bullpens, they are a fickle romance, to say the least. I can read all these names off of you, and all these names, I kind of like what they bring to the table. They brought in from the Dodgers a guy who was a high leverage inning guy last year, Ryan Brazier, 37 years old though. Ryan Presley, a closer for the Houston Astros when they won World Series. Lost his job last year to Josh Hader, 36 years old. Can he still get it done? Eli Morgan, electric stuff. Part of a great Cleveland Guardians bullpen last year. Can he be a guy who's a great piece in the 7th or 8th inning? Porter Hodge closed some games from them last year. Can he take a step forward moving forward? Ben Brown, is he in the rotation or is he a back-end guy? Either way, dynamic fastball, huge curveball. We love to see it. Luke Little, left-handed, big guy, big sweeping dynamics with his breaking stuff, could be a really good piece. Julian Merriweather got hurt last year, but again, big fastball, did really well for himself. Tyson Miller, perhaps the most consistent reliever on the Chicago Cubs last year. They used him in every situation, in any situation, and for the most part, he came through. Nate Pearson, who they got in the Toronto Blue Jays trade last year, had some rough moments at first, but you could definitely see why his stuff could play and why he could be a big weapon and component back there. And then a guy like Jordan Wicks, again, a rotation possible. Can he be your stretch man, give you 3 or 4 innings, and can that change up play in the late innings of games to help you get out of some jams? This is a group that is very hard to love. I want to so badly because they worked really hard on it, and I feel like that they did a better job of preparing themselves with their bullpen depth and talent. I like some bigger arms in this mix too as well, with some more velocity. That is good to see, especially with the Cubs rotation that lacks velocity at this particular time. It's a good group of names that could come together to form a very formidable bullpen. I just have no idea if it's going to work. To be honest with you, we won't know until we start seeing these guys in spring, and then we won't know until we see how Craig Counsell deploys them, utilizes them, and then these guys got to go out there and execute. Do the Cubs have a better shot at having a better bullpen this year than they did last year? Absolutely, and honestly, that is a low bar to cross because that bullpen was absolutely brutal, blowing over a dozen saves, easy victories. Hector Neris, total disaster. Even after him, they shuffled around to find anybody that could possibly close games. None of it worked out. I think this group will be better, but again, they are my hardest to love at this particular time. Rounding out with just a couple more minutes to go here with Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos right here on WLS AM 890. We are minutes away from tip-off with Michigan State at Illinois. We've got a couple more ones. They're all Cubs related. Most huggable. We're ending on a good note here, people. The most huggable right now in Chicago is Shota Imanaga. This guy needs to be protected at all costs, okay? It isn't every single day when a Cubs or any Chicago sports free agent comes over, signs with our team, immediately begins pitching or playing at an elite level, makes an all-star season in their first year, and then embraces the city the way that Shota Imanaga has. If you are not familiar, pay attention to it this year. When he shows up to Wrigley Field, especially on days that he pitches, he is wearing a Walter Payton jersey. He's wearing Connor Bedard gear. He's rocking Michael Jordan stuff. This guy loves and embraces everything about Chicago. My favorite city, your favorite city, and a city that we ride or die for. This guy embraces it. He loves it. He's an all-star. My question is, can he repeat the numbers that he did last year? I'm a little skeptical that he's going to keep that ERA under 3, which he did. But to also keep in mind, he actually lowered his ERA from the first half of 2.97 to 2.83 in the second half of last year. So it wasn't like he slowed down or ran out of gas. He actually had an ERA under 2 in the month of September. It was that month of June that really gave him a hard time. Now, the problem with him is going to be limiting base runners in moments when he gives up home runs, because he does have a propensity to let the long ball leave the yard. The question is, though, can he keep some of the traffic off the base paths, keep maybe some of those home run solos instead of those 2-3 run home run bombs, and maybe that will help him out a little bit. Again, if the Cubs offense is a little bit better, Shota Imanaga could also afford to maybe give up a run or two here and there. When you're winning 5-2, giving up a solo home run to make it 5-3 doesn't sting as much as when that solo home run makes it 3-3, or now you're down 2-3. A lot of situations the Cubs found themselves in last year. But most huggable, man, I want to give that dude a hug. He loves Chicago. He's over here. He came over from Japan to America. I can't imagine how challenging that must be. That lifestyle change, while also trying to do your profession at an elite level, not speaking the language, such a cultural shift in so many ways. And the dude handled it beautifully and made an all-star game, and loves Chicago and loves repping its gear wherever he gets the opportunity to, loves saying, "Go Cubs, go." He loves being here. We need to champion that. We need to applaud that. We need more of that here in the city. So most huggable for me goes to Shota Imanaga. And finally, my last one. My next big crush here on Sports Talk Chicago. This was Valentine's Day superlatives. So most likely to be my next big crush. And I think the next big crush coming at you in the next 6 months before we get football back. I don't think Chicago sports fans understand or realize how good Kyle Tucker is. Kyle Tucker is, I've been trying to explain it to my friends, is that think about him as kind of a souped up prime Anthony Rizzo. But this guy, I think, is an offensive type of hitter that we have not seen in this town since probably some of those Derek Lee seasons and some of those Aramis Ramirez seasons. Obviously, that KB MVP year was incredible and fantastic. Some of those Anthony Rizzo years were top-notch and elite, but I just think Kyle Tucker is on that KB level, is on that Derek Lee when he popped 45 home runs level. He's got 112 home runs his last 4 seasons. That's about 28 a year. And keep in mind, that's factored in and averaged out because he only played 78 games last year and hit 23 home runs in that span. His OPS plus the last 4 years, 147, 129, 142, 181. Runners in scoring position for his career, 299, 386 on base percentage, 532 slugging percentage. In high leverage situations, he's batting 309, 387 with a 537 slug. This guy is my new next big crush. I think he's going to save the Cubs' butt offensively many, many times. And I think hopefully from the jump, from April and May on, Chicago Cubs fans are going to realize this guy needs to stay in a Cubs uniform for as long as possible. And I think they need to give him whatever money it takes to keep him here in Chicago. And if they don't keep him here in Chicago, I think the ire is going to turn and the microscope is going to turn to Tom Ricketts more than ever has before. I just think Kyle Tucker is the next big star here in Chicago, and the next big star that no one here in Chicago sees it yet. He is my next big crush, and I can't wait to watch him play. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. This was Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos right here on WLS AM 890. You can follow me at Joey Sports Guy if you want to. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the listen. But don't go anywhere, because coming up right after this next break, we are going to get you over to Michigan State at Illinois, a huge Big Ten basketball matchup here tonight. Michigan State loses 3 of their last 4. Illinois, do they got them right where they want them? Can KJ, Kasparas, Jakunas, Can KJ Kasparas get them exactly where they need them right now and pick up a win in Champaign? You stick around and you find out. I really appreciate you listening to Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos right here on WLS AM 890. We will see you next week. Enjoy the game.